So welcome to Think2Thrive. Welcome back. I'm here this week with a friend of mine called Pat Slattery, somebody who's well known within the business world here in Ireland. But what I'll do is Pat has got a background. He's been working in business for 20 plus years this stage, from Limerick in Ireland originally. But I'll allow Pat to introduce himself to you, because then it'll be better than me doing it. Pat, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Adrian. Well, actually, I'm 30 plus years in business. I know life has been good to me, right? So I don't look that old, but I'm 53 years old, and I actually started in business very young. Indirectly, I was in business at 16 years old, so I'm kind of that length of time in business, really. I think it was about 26 before I realized I was in business, right? And but I've been around business quite a long time, actually. And I've been blessed in the world that I'm in, that I've made some really great contacts. And during that time, I reached out to learn a little bit more about business development and personal development. And maybe hitting on 30 years ago, I started that journey as well. When the first person I actually reached out to was Jim Rohn. And I was following Jim Rohn and using all his products and buying his programs. And then I went on to dealing with Brian Tracy. And actually today, Brian is a really good friend of mine, right? So he's still my go-to guy after about 28 years now. And I've been around, with a lot of them, with Bob Proctor, with Mark Victor Hansen and Sharon Lecter and, many, many other people. But that's the world I've been in now for 27, 28 years. At this stage, that I've been involved in mentorship and facilitating mastermind groups with people. So I've got to meet a lot of people over the years, Adrian, and got to meet a lot of successful people over the years too,
And I'm sure a lot of it has rubbed off over the years as well, Pat. When you surround yourself with people like some of the names that you've mentioned, I'm sure anybody listening to this in particular would have a really good idea of those names in particular. And Bob is obviously, he's something that I've followed for a good few years.
Yeah, well, Bob was a great guy, and again, became a good friend, and we would had him here in Dublin on 3 or 4 occasions, actually speaking in our seminars, and so we had a good personal contact with Bob, and you know what you say, being around these guys, it rubbed off. Well, I will actually tell you, Adrian, it rubbed off on purpose, right? Because I'm like a sponge. And when I get around these people, I don't listen to people for education. I listen to their information so I can use it to change my life. So it certainly rubbed off, but I mean this respectfully, it rubbed off on purpose. And this was the things I was learning from the likes of Brian and Jim and actually Stephen Covey, right, that I started working with many, many moons ago. And the reality is I learned here that this information is not just information. It's knowledge that you can take and turn it into skills and use that knowledge and skill set in order to change your life. So yeah, it rubbed off, but it rubbed off on purpose, I can tell you.
Everything has or there's a reason behind everything, or when you do something with a definitive plan in mind, it makes a big difference. But before we get into that, I always like to ask the guests on the show about what life was like growing up before they became an adult, let's say, before they got into the world of business. So I know a little bit, Pat, but would you mind telling us a little bit about what life was like in Limerick growing up?
Yeah, I think I was always an adult, Adrian. But look, life growing up for me, I mean, I grew up in a 3-bedroom council house in Ballinanty in Limerick, right? So if anybody's familiar with Thomond Park, that was my back garden, more or less, right, where I grew up. We lived there in a 3-bedroom house, which for most people is fairly okay. But I have 9 brothers and 6 sisters, right? So my dad, if he was alive, he would have been 102 last month. And he had broke his back at 42 years old. So my mum raised us with £71 a week. That was the pension that we had from my dad. So we didn't have very much, right? We had very little, to be honest with you. And I do have memories of going to school with, no soles in my shoes. And I used to go up to the shop looking for cardboard boxes, making excuses that we needed for something. But what we used to do is we used to cut out the shape of the sole of our shoes so we could put it into our shoe to try and stop the rain coming in. And even, I had this conversation with my mom in recent years, and she's like, she didn't know. And some of my siblings, my older siblings, would say, but sure, we knew the situation, so why would we tell you? There's no point telling you. We knew there was no money there for shoes, Whereas, of course, my younger generation, they were different because we had all went to work. They didn't experience it. My younger siblings, but she managed extremely well. And when we look back at life, I had a good childhood. There were things that were tough. We spent a lot of our time surviving, but I had a good childhood. I have great memories of my childhood, and maybe that's what I hold on to. Right? Sure, there were bad times, and sure there were things that you wouldn't like to have happen, but I don't hold on to that, Adrian. I let that go. I move on all the time, and I focus on the good things in my life and the good people that I surrounded myself with. So, at 14 years of age, I left school because I got a job. Now, I will say previous to that, and I just found myself having a conversation with somebody recently where this came up. Well, at 12 years of age, my next door neighbor had started selling bread as a bread round. And I started selling bread door to door, and I was selling 400 slice pans a day from house to house at 12 years old. So I maybe it was in the blood somewhere, but I was well able to get out there and get talking to people. Now, it wasn't that I was that confident, by the way. I think it was necessity. It was driven by necessity, and I knew there was an opportunity to get paid. So I was chasing money because money could change my life. That's something that we were always short of all of our life growing up. And we couldn't buy the things that we needed, never mind the things that we wanted. And the reason we couldn't is because we just didn't have enough money. So, if I was going to get paid money to do something, I was going to do whatever it takes. So at 14, when I got that job in a hotel, I left school completely. Now, I often do say that was a mutual decision. They didn't want me back either, right? And because I wouldn't have been the best student. However, I found myself being again surrounded by just incredible people and being spurred on and being encouraged, if you like, especially when I went working in a hotel, because that wasn't something that I was used to. I had a handful of people in my life that would have encouraged me. But in general, the people in my society, and in most society, by the way, not just mine, but in society in general, are not very encouraging, And then, of course, if you buy into the belief that if you come from a certain area and you have no education and all that, that you'll never amount to anything. And of course, again, that's a societal thing, right? And but again, thankfully, I found myself surrounded by really good people who encouraged me and spurred me on. And then at 16, I left home and I moved into a flat in the city because I had 5 jobs, right? So I couldn't get home to get my dinner and get changed to get to my next job. So I left home at 16 and moved into a flat in the city in order to keep these 5 jobs. Again, because if I could work during time I had free, that meant I could make money, right? So time is money, you know what they say, right? So every time I was working, I was making money. And then from there, Adrian, I've taken an attitude with me from the get-go, I got to tell you, that I'm going to show up and be the best that I can be. And that really came from the day I got my first paycheck in Cruises Hotel in Limerick. My first paycheck was £35. So I worked for £35 a week. But I came home to my mum, and that was 1984 now. And when I came home to my mum, and I could hand up half my paycheck, and I knew the difference that made. That was my most prized possession, Adrian. I was never going to lose that job. And the way I knew I couldn't lose that job, that I made a decision. I'm going to show up every single day and just give 100%, just be the best I can be, and take that attitude and go in with a smile on my face and be positive and to be present, if that makes sense, And it's something I've taken into everything I do, which, at 15, becoming a doorman. And then, by the time I was 16, I was getting offered more work and, end up with 5 different jobs and working like 7 nights and 7 days, and still people looking for me to come working for them and offering me more money. So why were people offering me money at such a young age with such little experience? And truly, it was all down to my attitude. It was everything I brought to the table, And that's how my business grew initially.
Is that something that you sort of put together looking backwards, or is that something you were conscious of at the time? Firstly, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you in the beginning, it was fear. I was driven by fear, right? Because, I often talk about some of the things I learned with Jim Rohn, and one of the things we discussed were the 4 emotions, and during that program, I discovered that when you decide you have enough of whatever's going on in your life that you decide you have enough of, that's the moment that your life is going to change. And I had enough of not having enough, Adrian. I had enough of my mum suffering and us suffering as a result of that too. So I had enough of not having enough. So
Hmm.
I had a fear, of course, because my dad got me the job, right? He knew the head porter. And so I went into that hotel really blind, right? And I was surrounded by educated people because most of the people working there would have come through hospitality college or something like that, or and then it was a really kind of prestigious hotel at the time. So most of the people coming into the hotel were people with money or educated people. So I felt
Yeah.
really outnumbered, right? I got to tell you, but I was very fearful, Adrian, because remember, society creates this belief system that if you come from a certain area, you won't get work. And plus, in my community, because when I moved from Ballynanty, I moved into Ross and Limerick. And in Ross and Limerick, we just over about 6,000 people in that community, and we had about 80% unemployment. So I just
Wow.
achieved something that 80% of my peers and my people in my community couldn't achieve. So I was always afraid that I was going to lose the job. And the truth is, in the beginning, that was fear driven. I was driven by fear that if I get up and I keep smiling, I do the best, and I don't give any reason to fire me. And
Mhm.
that was my driving force. That was my motivation. It was fear that I couldn't give them any
Mhm.
reason to fire me. And as I was doing more of what I was doing, it started to feel more comfortable. And I started feeling more comfortable about actually showing up and putting a smile on my face and saying please and thank you and having manners and showing gratitude to people, and having gratitude for life. And that
Yeah.
was something that kind of grew on me ever before I learned about what it was I was doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a saying, and I can't remember who said it, and maybe but it's about connecting the dots, looking backwards. You're always able to see the journey as you look backwards. You're not always able to see it out in advance. Um, it's an interesting one. Personally, I came through a hospitality industry myself. I'm sure being in Limerick, there's a lot of Shannon graduates in the hotel, or Shannon students or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah.
I went to the college where the other hospitality college on the West Coast, GMIT, there's always a great rivalry between the two. But I always think, personally speaking, and anybody who's worked in the hospitality industry for any length of time, you learn something that a lot of people don't learn in traditional industry, or you wouldn't learn the same thing working in a factory, or you wouldn't learn the same thing working on a building site, for example. And it's that interaction with people. To talk to people is a massive skill. And I was recently at one of your seminars, as you know, and that's obviously a skill that you've learned, is that being able to talk to people, being able to connect with people. Do you think that was important or stood to you over the course of your career?
Well, let me say this to you. I have a 32-year-old, a 27-year-old, and a 20 almost 23-year-old son.
Mhm.
And their first jobs, I pushed them into hospitality. And I tell you, I pushed them in there, right? Because I said, this is the best education you're ever going to get. And I really believe that. I believe any kid, anybody who's in college, anybody who's starting out, should get in and get a stint in hospitality, because the education is incredible, actually, right? Because the reality is, you're dealing with all types of people, and we know when you're dealing with with people and dealing with the public, it can be quite fickle, right? And but you're learning a hell of a lot about emotional intelligence if you're alert, if you're awake when you're there, and I certainly pushed, and it has stood to them, and has stood to them. Now they said they will never go back to hospitality, right? But the reality is, hospitality is an education. There's no question. No
Sure.
question.
Yeah. I suppose that would have helped you on the doors also. I had some friends down through the years who were doormen on various different establishments in Dublin. And one of the best that I ever saw was a very good friend of mine. And it was more about the talking. It wasn't nothing to do with strength. And he was a big lad, but it was nothing to do with his strength. It was about being able to connect with people.
Yeah, and but I see. Look, Adrian, you know something. I actually wrote a program many moons ago called "The Motivation for Crime," right? And we talk about motivation because I from a very young age, I've studied human behavior. I'm just fascinated by human behavior. So I started studying how people behave and the way people think. And then, of course, I wanted to know, well, what was the difference between people like me and people those who seem to have it all, right?
Mm, mm,
And then and people who come from an area like I come from. Why do we stand out so much? What makes us different? Why are there high levels of crime? right? And we have to understand what the motivation for crime was. And the reality is, it's the same motivation for success, right? I mean, whether we like it or not, and of course we don't like criminality, but the reality is these guys are very resourceful people, right? Those who are serious criminals are very resourceful and very intelligent. But we have to understand what motivates them to go down the road of crime and what motivates you to go down the road of success and doing something different. And the one thing I've discovered, even working as a doorman, is that everybody, doesn't matter where they come from, feels that they need to have a level of respect. And it's all about showing respect to people, no matter who they are, no matter what walk of life, no matter where they come from. You got to give respect. If you feel that you deserve it or you would like it to receive it, then you got to be able to give it. And that's something that I can honestly say I probably learned that from my dad and a few other good influencers I had in my life, was to respect people. And I've always respected people. And even over my years working in the security industry, I would understand why somebody is doing what they're doing and where they're going and what they're doing. And particularly when you're working on nightclubs and bars, you'd want a degree in psychology to work in some bars on some Saturday nights around the country or anywhere in the world for that. But the reality is here, when you give people respect, I think they respect that too. And sometimes, you can discover that people's behavior, and sometimes the person is not the behavior. Once we understand what triggers it, what triggers that motivation to commit a crime or to behave a certain way, or what creates that motivation to get out and do something successful. Once we can figure out what that is and we can find a way of communicating with people, then life becomes a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. You mentioned learning that from your father, and you also said your father got injured when he was 42, which is around about the same age as I am. So fingers crossed nothing happens. What did your father do before he got injured?
He had worked in a cement factory in Limerick. So
Okay.
it was a cement refinery. Of course, there was very little machinery back then. You know how it was. I mean, these guys are tossing bags of cement over their shoulders if it's, bags of sugar, And I think it was just a lift or something or a fall or something. I actually don't know specifically what it was that caused it, other than there was an accident at work. And of course, back then, Adrian, there was no compensation. Right, so it wasn't like you had an accident and you got compensated, and we all benefited. There was, well, at least if there was compensation, he didn't know about it. So it was different times.
Yeah, and different times insofar as, I mean, at least, or not at least, but in some way these days, if you were to have an injury like that and your livelihood up to that point has been manual labor, at least you could potentially still make money or make a livelihood doing something else. It's not always that you retrain or you do whatever, but it's very difficult, I suppose, or was very difficult. What's that? That's almost 50 years ago now, in the 80s.
Well, if he was 102, it was 60 years ago.
60 years ago. Wow.
60 years ago.
There was something else. As I said,
approximately.
Yeah. There was something else that struck me in researching, obviously, to have the conversation today. I listened to some podcasts that you did, and there was one other thing that's jumped out at me that you said you learned from your father, and that was to do with how you present yourself and how you present yourself in public.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was very interesting.
Well, actually, I wasn't even aware I discussed that in another one, but there you go. Well, I mean, look, my dad was a very proud man, and my dad wouldn't go to the local shop for his newspaper without having a shave, his shoes polished, shirt and tie, right? And he would always present himself well, and in particular, shoes polished. My dad was renowned. He was extremely well known for his shoes being polished so well, right? And we often met people who would have been army officers, and they asked him, was he in the army, right? Because his shoes would have been so shiny. And my father would say, look, we mightn't have much, but he said, you keep your shoes clean. He used to always say, you can always tell what was his word? You can always tell the class of a man by the cut of his shoes. And when he would go out into the world, and you would see him walking with pride, and people would recognize that. And that was something I certainly took for sure. I mean, of course, we're on a Zoom call now. It's a different ball game, right? But the reality is, if I'm going out there into the world to present myself, my business, I'm going to show up, and this is something, again, I took in that hotel. Matter of fact, if you spoke to my mum now, she'd laugh, because I was meticulous when it came to my shirts, because as a bellboy, because I was a bellboy in the hotel, so I had to wear my bow tie and my shirts. You couldn't have a single crease on my shirt. It had to come. I'd take it off and iron it again, right? So my mum used to say, "I'm glad he irons his own shirts," But that was something I took, because I just felt, for me, and again, it's something I got from my dad. If I'm walking into that business and that premise, I'm representing that premises, and I'm representing myself, but I'm also representing the premises. And if that premises has a persona that it's a really good, high quality premises, and it keeps a certain standard, then I have to step up to that standard. And I've always kind of raised my own personal standards that way, that I want to make sure that I look good when I present myself, and I represent anybody else's company. It's exactly what I took into all of my business, by the way, even in my security business. My guys, I mean, the people that work for me were turned out immaculately, right? They really look well, and look well in the uniform. And that was a big part of what we done too, because we're representing somebody else's business. So I want to represent them as in a way I would want them to represent me, if that makes sense. So it's something I took in from my, I certainly took that from my dad from very young, to put himself, to keep putting your best self out there,
Yeah. I laugh because it's a very long way away from the going out pajamas you see in certain parts of the country these days. There's and again, you coming from the hotel industry, I worked 15 plus years in the hotel industry before transitioning to something, but I got most comfortable wearing a suit, shirt and tie. If it wasn't wearing a suit, shirt and tie and polishing my shoes, I wouldn't have felt that I was dressed properly. And it's something else. It gives you, I think, I was listening to Brian Proctor the other day in his book, My Father Knew the Secret, which is a really interesting book. And he was talking about his father, Bob's love for tailored suits. And it's because I've been watching Bob Proctor stuff for a number of years, and every time you see him, he's immaculate. He was always in one of these, Italian suits or tailored suits or whatever. And recently I saw a video clip of him wearing a jumper. I almost didn't recognize him because, he was synonymous with being in a suit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, actually, I had that same experience, Adrian, with Brian Tracy during lockdown. And during lockdown, I invited Brian to speak at a webinar with me, to share it with people. And I've had many conversations with Brian, and that's something we've actually discussed in the past in our presentation and how we present ourselves, right? And why it is important to wear a shirt and tie, and why it's important to wear a suit, and he said, and it's a conversation we often had and with many people, and it's kind of like, well, this is the standard I have set for myself. And if I understand this is my standard, then I'm never going to lower my standard regardless. And something both myself and my wife often discuss, because we had a funny story, and maybe I'll tell you in a moment I get a chance, but from talking with Brian and understanding the importance of putting yourself forward and being dressed up and wearing a suit and tie. So during lockdown, when they come on to do the webinar, I'm wearing my suit and tie, and Brian comes on with a black polo shirt, and he goes, "Hey, look, you're wearing a suit." He said, "Oh," and I said, "Brian, and this was with everybody on the webinar. It was good fun." And I said, "Well, hey, is it Brian Tracy?" And I know Brian always wears a suit, so I'm not going to be disrespectful. I'm going to show up. And he said, "Hey, but we're all at home now." I said, "Hang on a second, I take off my tie," right? So I took off my tie. But it was a bit of a surprise. It was my first time ever seeing him casual,
Yeah.
So, but one thing I was going to say to you very briefly, myself and my wife were invited to an event about a year and a half ago, and she was asked to speak at a panel, and I was asked to present an award. And when we were invited, we got the invitation, and it was like very glitzy, and it says glitz and glam. And so Donna goes, "Oh, maybe this is black tie, but I check, is this formal or because it was a dinner and so forth." So And we were actually at another ball the night before in Tyrone, right, for with a client of mine who won an award. And we came down the country, and we arrived, and Donna was in a ball gown, and I'm in my tuxedo, because Don had asked the girl, "Is this, formal?" And she said, "Yeah, dress up, dress up, whatever." And most people there were in like jeans and t-shirts, right? I was the only one there with a tuxedo, the only one. And I remember looking around, going like, "Are we in the right place?"
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of, there was an awkward moment, let's just say, but then we kind of looked and we said, "You know something? We always say you can never be overdressed. You can never be overdressed." So we walked in there quite proud. And matter of fact, when I was giving the presentation, it looked really well in the photographs in the tuxedo, right? But the truth is, you can never be overdressed, Adrian. You can be underdressed, right?
Definitely.
And I had a meeting with a guy last week, and I arrived, of course, because it was a face-to-face meeting, and I arrived wearing a suit. And this guy he's looking to raise finance, right? And he's looking to raise a couple of million quid for a project, and he was dressed really smart. Right, we had maybe like I am now, with a shirt and a jumper and a nice pair of trousers and so forth. And he was dressed really smart, and actually he didn't have a jumper; he had a blazer on, right, with a shirt. And afterwards, he said to me, he said, "Pat," he said, "can I ask you a personal question?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Should I have worn a suit for this meeting?" And obviously, he was possibly intimidated a bit because I was wearing the suit. I said, "Not necessarily for this meeting." I said, "Because he happens to be a client of mine, and we were having a conversation around how he's going to build his value proposition, if you like." But I said, "Here's what I'd like you to think about. If I'm going to come to you to look for $1 million, then I should look like I'm $1 million. Right?
Yeah.
If I'm coming to you and I don't look like I can handle $1 million, would you be comfortable giving it to me?" He said, "Possibly not." So I said, maybe there's a lesson there.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm a firm believer, and I know we're slightly off topic, but it's all very relevant. I think I'm a huge believer in not always the dress to impress. It does play a huge part in the psychology, as you say. I mean, if you're going to a bank looking for money, you need to look like you know what to do with money. But these days, the super casual nature that there is out there in all sorts of walks of life. I mean, the richest person that you bump into on a day might be dressed in the holiest pair of trousers you've ever come across, and doesn't look like they have two shillings to rub together. But it's very unusual. It's not as clear cut as it used to, because I don't know if I told you before, but I used to work in car hire up in Dublin Airport. And when you talk about psychologically profiling people as they're walking towards the counter, I had rental agents working for us that were doing all the time, and they would see the guy walk up to the counter in the suit, shirt, and tie, and they'd be standing up and they'd be like, "How can you, sir?" Etc. And then they'd see somebody who was really dressed down, really casual, etc. And they'd be ducking away behind the counter, trying not to see them, because they didn't want to not have a sale, and they didn't want that to affect their numbers. One of the best tricks I ever saw was bending down to tie their shoelaces when a customer walked up to the counter, so that the other person would have to acknowledge them and say hello to them. But they were quite often left a little bit red-faced, because that person who appeared to have no money had no problem spending whatever it was to get the car or the insurance, protection, whatever it was that they wanted. So yeah, but I'm with you on the looking good. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, the reality is, you're right. Everybody judges, by the way. People think I don't judge. Everybody judges, right? And look, when people make judgments, I do my best not to judge, I've got to admit, right? I try to respect everybody. And but when people judge, they have to understand that is that not a reflection of your world, right? It's nothing to do with the person you're judging. And yes, there are people out there who make mistakes. Yes, there are people. But again, I guess I come from a different place, Adrian, where initially growing up in life, we were judged consistently on a daily basis. And I know the dangers of that level of judgment and how that actually conditions people, programs people to believe that their condition will never change, right?
Yeah.
And this is what, when Bob talks about the paradigm shifts, right? This is exactly what we need to be able to change, is to create a different way of thinking for people. And we respect everybody and accept everybody. But for me, if I'm going to put a professional program forward, I want it to look professional. But also, let me say this to anybody that might be listening. When you look good, you feel good.
Yeah.
Do it for yourself, right? Not to impress anybody, not to allow anybody to judge you. If you don't feel like dressing up, that's okay too, right? That's okay too. But do it for yourself, right? Because I know for sure, but this. There's nothing like putting on a brand new suit,
Yeah.
right? And a pair of brand new socks and a pair of brand new shoes. You know what I mean? It feels wonderful. And when you feel good, you look good because you carry something. You carry an energy that's very different than when you don't feel like you look good.
Yeah. Well, it changes your vibration. I know, not just Bob, because I keep going on about Bob, but anybody in that sort of personal development space, everybody talks about vibration, and your thoughts are obviously a vibration, and the vibration that you give out is then is in resonance with something else, and you get it back again. But the feeling, the emotion that you have when you look good, and you look good, really changes confidence. So that you're. Have you ever come across it? This is something I told my wife a little while ago, because she gets a little bit nervous when she goes to speak in front of people, and I told her to do the Superwoman pose. Or have you ever heard of that one, or the Superman pose?
Superman pose, or strike a pose, right?
Yeah. So something like that, yeah. So I told her, and especially my daughter as well, who's only 12. I told her about that the day she was nervous about speaking at her confirmation. She had to go up and she had to do one of the prayers of the faithful, and I was like, okay, so before you go up there, all you do is, before we start, you'll go in, Mommy will bring you in, and you'll do the Supergirl pose or the Superwoman pose. That sort of standing there with your hands on your hips, looking at yourself in the mirror as if you're Superman, and you get this image of invincibility in your mind. And she did a great job, absolutely fantastic job. And she wasn't nervous at all.
That's it. That's Tony Robbins, right? Make your move.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, you said make your move, right? So what's your move? What's your power move? What's the one thing that shifts you instantly?
Yeah.
Right. So put yourself into that state, right?
Very good. You said earlier you're nine brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So where do you come in the family tree?
I'd be number 11.
Number 11. Oh.
Number 11. Yeah. So I'm a good bit down.
My father came from a family of 7, and he said it was like there was 2 different families almost. He's the second eldest, and the younger ones in the family, sure, he was already out of the house and sort of away by the time they're growing up. So they only really sort of met each other and only really knew each other as grown-ups. Would you have had something similar? Or?
Well, absolutely. I mean, most of my older brothers and sisters were gone married before I was even born. I mean, some of my older brothers were married at 16, right? It was crazy times again, and then my sisters all left and went to Manchester when they were 16 and 15, and they left home. Now, I got to say, my dad was married previously, and his first wife died, and he had 9 kids when my mum married him, right? And then they went on to have 7 of us, right? But we're brothers and sisters. That's how we are brought up. That's how we believe, and that's the way we are, And but yeah, for sure. I mean, the older siblings were gone, and before I was even born, they were gone. So at any one time there might have been 11 of us living at home. There wasn't all 18 of us there. So,
Jeez.
but at any one time there might have been 11. So there was always 7 gone.
I guess these days family reunions, you almost need to hire a hotel just for the family.
Yeah, well, I remember my dad's funeral. Actually, this is probably the one time where everybody really came together, and there was a client of mine standing there, and he said, "Who are all the men in the black suits behind the hearse?" And I said, "Well, they're family, brothers, nephews, grandnephews, and they're all men, Adrian, right? Because most of my family went on to have big families as well, and there was a lot of us there." I think the last time I counted, I have something like 100. There's 100 and maybe 160 nephews, nieces, grandnephews, grandnieces. So there is a lot of us there. There's
160.
a lot. Yeah, it's quite a large family. Quite a large family. So
And growing up in Limerick, as you said, Thomond Park in your back garden, you're obviously a Munster fan.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I was a diehard. And I ended up working with the team for about 8 years as well, so I had a lot of close contacts there. But sure, I mean, I scored my first try in Thomond Park, I played for Thomond Rugby Club, right? That was my club, and but sure, I was at so many matches, Adrian, and I suppose when I can look back now, you could probably say I was even entrepreneurial back then, because there was a guy, Cookie, you used to call him Peter. He was the groundsman, and what we used to do is, because young lads, we used to jump the wall, right? So, we'd climb over the wall and get in over the wall. And that's how it was, right? And but at the end of the match, I had my guys lined up along the pitch to go and collect all the corner flags and the pads for him. Otherwise, there was young lads stealing them, right? So I would have all my guys lined up. This was at about 5 and 6 years of age, and this might sound crazy. At 5 and 6, I used to leave home, go up and climb over the rugby wall to go to matches, right? And then I would go in, and he'd give me 50p, right, for getting all them in for him. And I would give the guys 5 pence each, and I'd have 20p for myself. Right? So maybe I was even entrepreneurial at that age, But I love the game of rugby,
That's a big thing that I throughout these conversations with people, I'm always trying to figure out is what was the obviously you said it was the need, it was the fear of not having the not being able to, but there's some people that just have something, there's some sort of a spark within them, and it's the old sort of nature versus nurture, I suppose, to a certain degree. It's like, if you're, I mean, what could you possibly, I have a daughter who's 6 at the moment, and she wouldn't, let's say, have that sort of an entrepreneurial spark, but I mean, there must have been something from a very early age where you went, yeah, I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to do what my mom and dad do. I'm going to do something different, even alive.
Well, I guess I possibly. When I look back, I mean, I had some great influencers in my life. I had an auntie, my dad's sister, and she was a widow very young. Actually, her husband died when she was expecting their first child, right? So, and funny you talk about the Shannon College, because she used to do a lot of work there. She was the head of the duty free shop in Shannon Airport for 35 years. Yeah. She was the first employee actually in duty free in Ireland. And and then she would meet and greet all the presidents and the dignitaries when they would come in. She was the person to meet them and welcome them and so forth. And she was, Bridie was very grand, But as a kid, she lived near us, right? And because her son had grown and he was gone to college and gone to work, right? And working in Dublin. He used to work with the customs, so he was working in Dublin. So I would go and visit her most evenings and run errands for her. And she taught me how to read before I started school, right? She taught me how to tell the time. Well, I learned how to reading JWT and Sunway brochures, right? So she'd get them at the airport and bring them home, right? And maybe I often look back now and think maybe there was something planted, because I would look at people sitting on the beach in Spain and Portugal, and that was a whole new world away. That was like something you only ever saw in the movies. And I never ever dreamed that was possible, but maybe it did. Maybe that was put there, And I had good guidance, I guess, from a young age. I spent most of my days. My dad, we used to walk most days. My dad used to cut black thorn sticks and shillelaghs, so we could walk often 20, at least 20 miles a day, or 5 days a week, up into the Clare Hills, be cutting sticks, and I picked mushrooms. I knew where all the best mushrooms were and all the best blackberries and wild plums. So of course I used to make blackberry jam and wild plum jam and sell them door to door as well as a kid, right? I just needed to make money, because if I could buy sweets, because they weren't there. We didn't get them, So at least I had to find my own way if I wanted them,
Yeah.
But I had good guidance.
Yeah. It might be difficult for anybody sort of growing up in today's Ireland to understand. And I mean, there's 10 years, let's say, between you and I, and I would have grown up mostly in the 90s as opposed to the 80s. But I know the stories from my own father and mother, is how sort of difficult things were in the 80s. It must be very hard for people to sort of being able to grasp that now, how different the country was, 40 years ago.
Well, I guess, Adrian, I look at that now, and I've often thought about that, actually, right? And I look at how my circumstances have changed. But I also believe, for me, from how my circumstances have changed, from where I am now, from the outside looking in,
mm-hmm.
we can forget very easily. And I know for sure that there are plenty of families in Ireland and everywhere around the world who are still going through the hardships that I went through as a kid. Yeah. And I still see that. And it's when you get the chance to look into those communities and see that happening, in some cases, a lot of people don't recognize it, but those who are still living in it, they know what it feels like, and would my kids know, other than the stories I tell them, right? Would they have experienced it? No, they wouldn't. And they've experienced their own challenges too. And I think everything is really relevant for whoever's going through what they're going through, right? But you know what? The only thing I keep saying to people is everything is possible and everything is doable. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. And I'm here as living proof of that, right? And that's why I share my story, Adrian, is because maybe it'll inspire somebody to step up. Maybe we can show people that there is opportunity and there is a way, that somebody might say, I have enough too. I have enough of not having enough, and I am capable, and I can be doing, have whatever I choose to be doing, have. Even when we look now, I mean, I say my son is 23 in a month or two now, and it's a tough time for kids that age now to get out into the world to try and make a living and to be part of what's out there with the cost of living. So they're going through their own pain in their own way, if that makes sense, would they survive the way we did? You know what? If they're thrown into that situation, I'm sure they would, Adrian, right? Will they ever understand it? Probably not. But then maybe we will never understand what they're going through now either. It's what your experience is, what you're experiencing, and it's whatever you believe is going on becomes your reality, right? And so even when we look back, and this is why too, why we do what we do, Adrian, and why you do what you do and what I do, is really to become an inspiration to somebody else. And I think for your listeners here, is if people make a choice to step up and actually allow themselves to become role models, maybe you'll inspire somebody. And our story is just our story, right? It doesn't matter. We often say, that's just my story. I no longer choose to live in it. It's only your story if you choose to live in it, right? So it doesn't matter what hardships. It doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, But it's not easy when you're going through it, right?
True. I see you hit the nail on the head there, Pat. Really, the whole sort of concept or idea behind doing this Think2Thrive is all about exactly that. It's to try and get across to people that I'm interviewing people from all different sort of walks of life and all different backgrounds, all different sorts of upbringings, etc. And the idea is, it doesn't matter where you've come from. You can go wherever it is you choose to go. And to try and inspire, if one person was to listen to this and get an inspiration and to try something, to do something outside of themselves, I would be delighted. It would be an absolute honor if that happened. So after the hotel, because you mentioned nightclubs and you mentioned doorman and security, etc. So at what stage did you sort of transition out of the hotel? Why did you transition out of the hotel?
Well, why I transitioned out of the hotel is quite a funny story, right? I was getting on very well with one of the waitresses that the manager fancied, and
Right. Okay.
and then me and him fell out, and one of us was going
So
to lose, and it wasn't going to be him, you know. And but
you were transitioned, I suppose.
I was, yeah, you know, and I was curious. Let's just say, Adrian, right? And the funny thing is, we were genuinely actually just friends. There was never anything ever happened. We were great friends, but he didn't see it that way, and he was much older than her, and she wasn't interested. But he, for some reason, took me as a threat, and that became an issue then, you know. And so, how did I become a doorman? Well, you know, I was quite big for my age, Adrian, and I was in really good shape, right? And so one of my brothers were doormen for a good few years before I was. And one night, somebody didn't show up for work, and I happened to be in town. I met with my brother, and he said to me, "Try on that blazer," and the blazer fit. So I qualified as a doorman, right? So I started working as a doorman, you know, and it kind of grew from there, you know. And again, you know, everything that I done, Adrian, I just gave it 100%. I brought the best of me, you know. I brought the best of me, and you know, with some people, and I think when people start looking back in life, people always question themselves, or they start comparing themselves to other people and whether they're good enough or anything like that. And let me tell you, there were, without question, people who could probably do a better job than me, but nobody could be a better me. And I knew that. And that's all I could offer. That's as much as I could bring to the table. And people can go off and they can talk you down and challenge you in different ways, but there's nobody can be a different you or be a better you than you. So I made that choice. That's all I can be. That's as much as I can do. And I show up every day. And you know what? Before I was 18, I had 25 doormen working for me. I was controlling 5 nightclubs. I was still too young to get in. Right? You know, so and all of that work, Adrian, came. I didn't go looking. People came and approached me. People, nightclub managers, hotel managers, owners, they were coming to me saying, "I love your attitude. You're exactly what we need. Would you come working for me?" And that's why I ended up with 5 jobs. And then eventually I was refusing them because I couldn't get any more. I had no more time. And kind of said, I can't. And then people started offering me more money. And the one thing I will say is I was extremely loyal. You couldn't buy me. So if you had given me work when I needed work, Adrian, I'm committed to you for life. That was all who I am. So people couldn't buy me. And then, you know, I had one particular guy came to me one time. He said, "Paddy," he said, could you hire guys who will work the way you work? Could you do that for me? And I'll give you a couple of quid if you get these guys in. That's how my business started. And what excited me about it, Adrian, was I could go back to my Ross and hire my friends. That was my real driving force at the beginning of my business. Once I knew I could make some money, because at that stage I was making enough money, right? Because I never envisaged that I was going to become a business owner. I just wanted to have enough money. At 19, I bought my first house, right? So I had a home, right? Then I got myself a car. Now I have a home and a car and a job. That was it for me. As far as I'm concerned, I have achieved everything I could ever dream of. I never wanted any more than that. But as I started to grow a little bit more, and you know, and you see an opportunity, and I mean, opportunity presents itself to you. And this is something we say, because you talked about the vibration earlier, and you've got to be very clear about what vibration you're operating on. And I often talk about it in the most simplistic way about you come from a place of your highest value or your lowest value. When you're operating your lowest value, your frequency is very low. And usually when we know when frequencies and we understand you're operating a certain type of frequency, you attract things at that frequency. So if you're operating in a low value, what happens is low value opportunities tend to find you. But if you operate at your highest value, and remember, it doesn't mean that you have to be the smartest person. It doesn't mean that you have to be better than everybody else. It just means you show up and be the best you can be, and you come from a place of your highest value. And this is something I learned and has been proven to me many, many times to be true. And I learned this from a book called The Celestine Prophecy, right? And in The Celestine Prophecy, at the last chapter is what I got this message from. When you come from a place, maybe if I read it again, I probably wouldn't even read it the same way. I don't know, might not make sense as it did to me then. But I know that if you come from a place of your highest value, if you operate every day, if you show up operating at your highest value, the highest value opportunities find you. And this might sound bizarre. When you operate at your highest value, and the highest values, and you're able to deliver whatever it is that you do. I don't care what it is you do. But when you deliver that at your highest value as a human being, not by your services now, I'm talking to everything. Because when we talk about mindset, that's not just how you think, it's everything. It's your whole being. It's everything about you. It's everything that you do. It's everything that surrounds you. And when you operate at that level, those highest value opportunities find you. And usually what happens, Adrian, is more and more people will come to you and go, hey, please take my money. People want to do business with you. They want to pay you for something.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. So, because people get concerned thinking about wealth and thinking it's an evil thing or it's a bad thing, it's a dirty thing to be talking about. But that's the reality. You can use that to change the world. You can change many people's lives if you earn more money. So why would you not?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you know what has happened? I often talk to people. People need to become shameless about this now. You need to become shameless about being the best you can be. You need to become shameless about building a business, and you need to become shameless about collecting as much money as you possibly can. And when I say that to people, they go, "Oh, that's a bit strange to be shameless." Well, what's the opposite of shameless?
Shameful.
Shameful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you won't be shameless, you're going to be shameful about who you are, about what you can do, about what you're capable of, about how you deliver your services, about your business. Because again, that's back to that conditioning that people have been programmed to believe to be the truth, that it's shameful but I have money, so they don't think about being shameless. I encourage everybody to be shameless. Get out and enjoy life. Be full, be completely full of life. And allow yourself to have everything and anything. And you choose what you do with it. You can make a difference in the world. That's for sure. So there's so much more, I'm going off track here, Adrian. I'm going on a rant.
No. Pat, I absolutely flipping love it. You know that, because growing up, I'm sure my house is no different than any other house around the tree. Nobody spoke about money. Yeah, you daren't speak about money. And money is a dirty word. Money doesn't grow on trees. The poor are miserable, or sorry, the rich are miserable, etc., etc. And it was sort of, because I talk about paradigms and I talk about conditioning, as you call it. There's a cultural conditioning in most, and not in all countries. I think America is one where it's completely different. They're quite open about money, and things like that over there. But there's like a cultural conditioning in Ireland that money is the root of all evil, and I think lack of money is the root of all evil, because when you don't have it, it's all you think about, and it's all you're trying to do. You're going to do anything you can in order to get it, or to try and get it. There was a saying I came across the other day, and it's attributed to John Wayne, and I don't know whether it's actually John Wayne or not. He goes, somebody said that money is the root of all evil. He says, people who, hang on a second, rich people aren't happy, he says, but it's more comfortable to cry in a Mercedes than on a bicycle. And I mean, there's one thing about having the nice car and having the nice house and all that, but you can't help other people. I think you can't help other people if you can't help yourself. And if you don't have the money to look after yourself properly, you're less likely, less able to give to other people, because you're miserable yourself. So if you can be happy yourself, first of all, the same way they say on an airplane, when you get on the airplane, when they talk about the masks coming down, you have to put on your own mask first before you can turn around and help anybody else. And it's the exact same thing. I think if you're able to concentrate and get the wealth that you need yourself first, then you're going to be able to help much more people than if you're going to be poor your entire life. And I think as a country, we need to spread the message that money is not evil, and money is a multiplier.
100%. I had a school teacher in 6th class, a guy called Paddy Flynn, and the man was an absolute genius. I got to say, this is probably the only, in all the time I was in school, this was such a pleasant experience in 6th class with this guy. And he took a coin out of his pocket, and I remember him holding it up in front of us. He said, "Remember this, guys. Remember this. It is made round to go round. Make enough of it and spend enough of it." He said, "That's what's going to keep economies alive. Remember, it is made round to go round. Make it and spend it, make it and spend it." Because The truth, and I remember him still. I can see him right now standing in front of me, and I was what 10 and a half years old when he stood in front of me and said that, and something resonated. Obviously, that I still remember that moment. And
Yeah.
but people need to understand, money only has energy when it leaves your hands. It only has value when it leaves your hands. It's of no good to you if it's squandered, right? It's only when you spend it and you keep it moving that it creates value and it changes lives. And when you talk about even that cultural thing, and isn't it funny because the people who keep saying and talking about, money is the root to all evil, and only rich people are, rich people are sad people and miserable people. Isn't it funny that the only people they talk about are people who talk about money being evil are the people who don't have it,
Yeah.
right? Now, the reality is when we really understand what's going on here, right, and that's a programming, because even when we grow up as kids, I know when I grew up as kids, we had cartoons. And when we watch the cartoons or any of the old black and white movies, I am that old. I remember black and white movies, right? But the only people who had money were the banks and the gangsters and the bank robbers, right? So nobody else had money, right? So
Yeah.
when we start to buy into that, and you become conditioned to believe that again, and that's, to me, that's complete nonsense, right? And however, again, people are programmed to believe that. And why they're programmed to believe that is because they get angry, because they're motivated by that anger, because of poverty. Because when you talk about poverty, well, what creates crime? What do you think is the cause of crime? It's lack of money.
Black. Yeah.
All crime is a lack of money. All right, yes, you will have some people on the power struggle and so forth, and ego gets in the way. But in the majority of cases, it's lack of money. So I often say to people, well, let me tell you something. If you believe that money is the root to all evil, and I often ask people this question, have you ever put on an old jacket or a pair of jeans that you haven't worn in a while? And when you put your hand in your pocket, you might find a five or a tenner. And everybody goes, yeah. And I said, well, did it make you happy? And they go, yeah. Well, then that's that myth out the window. Money does make you happy, right? So again, it's just a myth. It's like everything, Adrian. It's like where I came from. Because I wasn't educated, I shouldn't own a business. I shouldn't even get a job. Because of where I came from, I shouldn't get a job just because of my address. And because I was so young, I had no experience, I shouldn't be able to run a business. If you were to buy into all of those preconditions, and these are conditions, again, that I say that people are programmed. And unfortunately, there are too many people in the world who are programmed by these conditions that are created by society, and people buy into them and they become their belief system then. And then they feel that that's where I'm at and that's what I have to amount to. Even, we kind of joked about the people in the pajama brigade we used to call them, right? Going out in the pajamas. Well, that's just natural and normal life for them now. That's just the way life is. And then, and I say this respectfully, in most cases, they don't understand any different. That is just how life is, because that's how society has created that, if that makes sense. So we all have to play our part, and we have to say, hey, do you know what? Everybody's welcome. Everybody and anybody can do whatever they choose to do. Everything is possible for those who want it. That doesn't mean we have to excuse certain behavior. We don't. We know what we have to accept into our world and into our life. But I keep saying to everybody, you know what, show up and be a role model. And if we can, like you said, Adrian, if just one person takes something away from this podcast and it changes their life, well, that's job done. That's job done, right? And then, hey, let's try and touch one more in the next one.
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%. So hotel into spending a lot of money on your own personal development, on growing yourself, because that's a huge part of it. And one of my favorite sayings is another one of Bob's, which was, change is inevitable, personal growth is a choice. Okay, so you made the choice to work on yourself. Why?
Well, that was kind of well, I guess, again, I can look back now and reflect on my life and say, right, I was still running away. I needed to make more money, and I wanted to make lots of money. I wanted to have comforts. I had a son when I was only 20 years old, and I wanted him to have things I didn't have. And I worked really hard to make sure that happened. And there was for quite a long time, there was that fear of, what if I lose all this? And And even ironically, when I was 19, I took a job in a factory as well, right? I got a full-time permanent job in a factory, in a manufacturing plant, right? So I was really made for life, Adrian. And I stayed there for about 8 years before eventually I moved on and realized that I was making 4 and 5 times as much money in my part-time business as I was working there full-time in a foundry, right? So but I remember learning a bit about peer groups, and I kind of pulled together a peer group. I wanted to do more. I wanted to learn more now. I was also conscious of what I didn't know, and I wanted to learn more. And I remember pulling in my peer group, and one of the guys looked at me and said, "Hey, Pat, how did you become so successful?" And I kind of went, "They're talking to me." Right? But at the last stage, Adrian, I had 65 staff. Now, maybe most of them are part-time, but I still had 65 staff. And I still didn't even see myself as owning a business. And I was going, "How do you mean?" And next thing, one of the guys goes, he said, like, "Pat, we really look up to what you do and how you do things, and we're just eager to learn from you. We want what you have." And I was in that room thinking, I wondered what they have, right?
Yeah.
I was quite taken aback. And then I thought to myself, geez, actually, I am quite successful when I started really getting the comparisons to other people's businesses. And I remember saying to myself, well, what was I doing? How did I get here? And I had been, at that stage I was doing a lot of different programs, and I was learning from these guys, and I was selling like crazy, Adrian. Right? Selling, I was a natural salesperson, but the truth is, I guess, I never believed for a moment that I wouldn't get the job when I went for a contract. I never even gave it a second. Actually, that wasn't even my mind that they would say no. And isn't it funny that nobody ever said no?
Yeah.
Right?
I
never believed it.
That's something, right? I had a little bit of an epiphany over the weekend. My wife and I were driving down to Galway. We were listening to Audible. My new favorite thing to do is just listen to books while we're driving. And it was You Were Born Rich. The bit that I must have read that book 2 or 3 times and listened to it a few times, but I had never copped a bit about expectation before. That the bit about expecting the result. So exactly what we just said there is that you expected people to say yes to you, and so they said yes to you. And that just really something that came to me over the weekend for the first time, as I say, that I remember coming across that in that book. But yeah, so when you expect, you get what you expect. Which is completely different. When I was a kid growing up, I actually told myself, and I remember this, don't expect much, then you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. And isn't that so unfortunate that that's how most people have been taught? And of course, that comes from they grow up having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, right? And unfortunately, most people have a fixed mindset because they don't understand. They have a resistance to change. They compare themselves with other people. They have the fear of failure. They avoid feedback. Right, there's so much they have this negative self-talk. Now, when I say negative self-talk, usually, in my opinion, that's information that was downloaded from somebody else. That negative self-talk is actually somebody else's old story that people have downloaded and stored, and it seems to come up whenever they need it, right? But the reality is, for me, when you set out an expectation, you have to. We often say too. Now that I understand this even more, I inspect what I expect, right? I inspect what I expect, which means I show up every day with intent. And I set out my intention every single day, and I set out what it is I want to achieve and what I'm going to do. And I'm always continuously learning, right? I embrace challenges when they come away. I look for feedback. I don't look for criticism, by the way. Let me tell you this. People say, oh, I'm looking for some constructive criticism. There's no such thing. Stop asking for criticism. Ask people for positive feedback. Right? Yeah. So give me some positive feedback, because you know what? My mom used to say, if you have nothing nice to say nothing at all, right? So if you can't give me positive feedback, then I don't want your criticism. Most people know already what they're not great at. They're beating themselves up most of their life because of it. They don't need to be reinforced by somebody else, right? We have to change. We have to have that shift in how people treat people. Therefore, we get a change in that shift in how people actually accept themselves too, right? So, having that expectation, and the truth is, Adrian, I have an expectation of every dream, every goal that I want to achieve is going to become my reality. And I haven't stopped. I haven't even started, let me tell you, on what I'm going to achieve and what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it. And I can tell you, I had a client of mine, Dr. Francis Valor. He's written 6 books on mindfulness. And I had him speaking with me in an event before, maybe 5 years ago now. I got him to speak at one of my events. But he shared something, 2 things he shared actually. One, he talked about the greatest journey for mankind. And the greatest journey for mankind is from the head to the heart. Right? And if people can connect the both, because most people, they go with their heart, right? And they find that they say, I should have listened to my head, right? Or when some people make logical decisions, they can't make emotional decisions, so they very rarely move forward at all because they're overthinking, right? So what you got to do is, how can we connect the both? We can connect that journey from the head to the heart, and let me tell you, the world will be a lot better. So go with your heart, but bring your head with you, right? But also something, he sent me a video one time, and the message on it was to die empty. And my intention, Adrian, is I will die empty in terms of every goal, every vision, every dream, everything I want to achieve, everything I want to experience. I'm going to do my absolute utmost, because when the day comes, when I'm on my deathbed and I look back, I'll have died empty. I won't be taking any of those goals or dreams or visions with me. I will have got out and done what it needs to do in order to have it and to live my life and to be part of every day, be part of my life. And I highly suggest that others do the same.
It's very similar to something that I heard, and I can't remember who said it, but it's to not to die with your music still inside of you. So to get out there and to do what it is that you want to do, and the only reason that you want to do it is because because it's part of you, it's inside of you. It's you only want to do the things that you actually really want to do. I know that doesn't sound very good, but you know what I mean. It's the only thing that sort of prerequisite to wanting to do anything or to wanting to achieve anything is that it's a desire, something that you really want to do. You're emotionally connected with it. It has to be something that you really, really want. No, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, isn't it unfortunate that most people don't take the time to discover what they want? They usually listen to what other people think they're entitled to, right? Based on their circumstances. And this is back to the old conditioning. And the reality is, when people need to understand here that everything you do is a choice. Everything. And every single choice that you make in life, there will be a consequence, or there will be an outcome, for want of a better word. Those people hear the word consequence, they think it's a bad thing. There are good consequences too, if you make good choices, right? So the reality is, it doesn't matter. If you try to cut corners or shortcut yourself, you know the outcome already. You're going to cheat yourself, you know the outcome. So what else did you expect? You can't say you were hopeful. People go, I was hopeful for more. But if you were hopeful, that means you didn't expect more, right? So what do you really expect? And life will give you what you expect, and nothing more, nothing less, by the way. So effectively, these are self-fulfilling prophecies. You get to choose. You get to choose. And it begins with your belief system and what you believe about yourself and what you believe you're capable of. And that really matters by what you listen to and what you allow in. And actually, Adrian, I don't know if you met my wife yet, but my wife actually, well, Donna is a multi-times best-selling author, by the way, right? But she's also a psychologist and has a very unique story. But she wrote a program called Environmental Programming. And she teaches this a lot. And she speaks about a lot of seminars and, in a lot of corporates and gets people to understand this. So maybe I'll introduce her. You can get her on your podcast sometime. I know you'll enjoy it. But she talks about environmental programming. Matter of fact, she's a great interview of herself and Bob. Bob, the last time he was over here in Dublin, it was down to the cameraman, really. He was really good, But I filmed them.
That was you, I take it, yeah?
Yeah. Well, we were having a conversation backstage, and we were chatting about something, and they talked about the law of attraction, but also the laws of vibration. And in the conversation, I said, hey, stop. I need to record this. I took up my phone and I said, just have the conversation. And it's about 10 or 12 minutes long, but what a brilliant conversation that was, right? And understanding of, as you said, managing change, shifting the paradigms, but getting involved in the process, right? Showing up. Because the truth is, you know what? It doesn't matter to me. And I say this respectfully. There are things that go on in the world that you have no control over. That's for sure. Right? Things, and bad things do happen to good people. And unfortunately, sometimes good things happen to bad people too. Right? So people need to get over that and understand and accept that. But the reality here is every single thing that you do is a choice. Everything. And with every single choice, there will be an outcome. Guaranteed, right? Go back to one of the greatest laws of the universe for me is the law of cause and effect, right? For every effect, there's a cause. And that cause usually begins with a choice. And your choices will be made by the belief systems that you carry in. So we need to be able to, and I can tell you one of my greatest lessons, without question, one of the greatest lessons for me was to be prepared to change my beliefs often. Because I can tell you, my beliefs, some of the beliefs I was holding on to, are responsible for the greatest setbacks in my life. Until I learned I need to let go of these beliefs, and they don't serve me either. And understand that I can make better choices. And when I make better choices, I usually get better outcomes. Right? So therefore, if I have an expectation, which I do, like I said, if I'm going in to meet somebody, I have an expectation. And that expectation is always met. Always met. Why? Because I know the choices I have to make and I know what I have to deliver on in order to have the outcomes that I choose to have. Remember, I choose to have.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest issues or problems, and I think we all suffer from it until we become more aware, is that we believe that there are circumstances outside of ourselves that control what happens in our life. And
I'm going to jump in for a second, Ethan, right? Because if anybody is watching and listening to this, and I'm going to share this out to my network, and I know they're going to expect this straight away. When you say we, you don't mean me.
I mean me too.
Right? And I'll say this to people. Think about your language, because when we talk about paradigm shifts in the programs we're setting, and when people say we, you know how we do this and we do that, we do this, you're setting a pattern. You got to break that, right? Yeah. So usually I will say to you, I agree with you. Lots of people do that.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Most people might do it, and lots of people do it. But because the reason I say that, and I do this respectfully, Adrian, by the way, and not to catch you out or anything, I will do this with everybody. And I do to myself sometimes. If I use that word we, I will go, hang on. When we say we don't mean me. In other words, if I keep taking in people saying we, I'm allowing myself to get into that space unconsciously, by the way. Unconsciously. And most people, when they're challenged and trying to overcome a challenge, is because they're unconsciously unaware. It's not that they're stupid. It's not that they're not awake or anything like that. It's just because we live in a busy world. And in a busy world where we have so much information to download, we got to be very careful what we're downloading. And therefore, we must become consciously aware of everything we're taking in and how does it serve me and the language that we use. Because if we say it, we have to be thinking it, right? And we know you are what you think.
Yes, yeah. No, thank you for that. That's good. I'm always open to be pointed in the right direction, 100%. I'm a work in progress.
Oh, hey, and so am I. Absolutely, always, every day.
Yeah. Where were we? We were security. So what happened after security then?
After
I'm conscious of time too, by the way. So.
Well, there was a lot, Adrian. Let me tell you that, a lot. I had a waste management company where we would go into some of the bigger pharmaceuticals and we would do all our waste processing, which we would reduce their landfill, if you like, and turn most of their waste into recyclables. And that came through a friend of mine who was working for somebody else, and they had a takeover, sold to a multinational company, and I said to him, "You're on the way out. I'm going to get rid of you now because there's no value." So eventually he built the relationships. He followed my instruction, built the relationships, and then came and asked me would I go into business with him on that. So we did. And we done really well from that. A good business, a really good business. I was involved in multi-level marketing. I was involved in business referral groups. I was very much involved in BNI, even though it wasn't my business. But then we had another one, SID, which is Services Ireland originally, but then we turned it into Success in Doing, right? So it became our seminar company. And then we had business referral groups as to manage business referral groups. Then we had an online marketing company, then a little bit of property. I had a pub and restaurant in Lanzarote, and now I'm also involved in property in Spain. And so yeah, there's been lots, Adrian. And I say this respectfully, I'm probably forgetting some of the things I've done, right? Or maybe even some of the things I'm still doing and maybe not realize I'm still doing it. But again, this is what happens when you come from your highest value. All these opportunities find you. They'll find you. You know, and of course, my mentorship is something I'm very proud of, and I will do until my dying day, which would be 112, by the way. I have made that choice, so I have an expectation to live until I'm 112, right? So, and yeah, so there's so much more, but the reality is you surround yourself with the right people. You keep stepping up. You take the chance. You know what people say to me, and this actually was a conversation I had with Bob actually way back. And actually, this is the one that Bob gave me the testimonial at this event, and we had worked together for a couple of days when he was here in Dublin. And we talk about, you know, when people give us a chance, people are looking for a chance in life, and they're looking for a chance to get an opportunity. Well, the reality is when you do get a chance, now you're left with, back to what I said a moment ago, you know you're left with a choice. You either take it or you don't. And if you take it, you have to take it wholeheartedly. You have to go the whole hog, which will result in multiple choices, not just one. It's not as simple as that. But if you choose every single day to get up and be the best you can be, and to be the best you can be is everything you do, is everything you say, it's how you think, it's how you behave. It's about taking those opportunities when you come your way. Then you will be successful, whatever success means to you. And, you know, and then you surround yourself with the best people. You get the time to spend with the people that are most important in your life. Now, all that is by choice. All that is by choice. And there are tools, there are strategies. You just got to get out and find those who are doing what you want to do. That's what I done, actually. I went seeking, like I said earlier on in this call, I was very purposeful about this. I didn't go to be educated. I didn't spend my money to go and hire these guys as my coaches to be educated. I spent that money so it could change my life. And I think that's what's really important when people come to you, Adrian, for coaching. They got to understand you're not just coaching them, you're giving them information that could change your life if they take it and apply it. That's what it's all about. Right? It's the application of the knowledge, it's the application, it's the attitude that you have to bring. Anybody can learn new skills and anybody can learn new knowledge. You will need that too, by the way. But it's the attitude that you bring is going to change everything.
It's the attitude. I mean, if I was to take anything away from this conversation, which I do loads, by the way, but the biggest thing is attitude. The definition I came across of attitude is it's a combination of your thoughts, your beliefs, and your behaviors. So what you think, what you believe in your subconscious, and how you actually put yourself out there, and it's if you looked at what an awful lot of people do, their attitude, in a lot of ways, not that it stinks, but it's that it's a really negative attitude. But it's not their fault. In an awful lot of cases, the people do the best they can with the knowledge that they have, and if they've never been taught any of this, like I was in my mid-30s before I really started going down the rabbit hole of personal development and a better understanding. You know, up until that point, I was not that I wasn't interested, but I was interested, but I wasn't committed. And there's a huge difference between being interested in something and being committed to it. Yeah. When you say about being the best that you can be, my tagline on my emails for years was "Dare to be the best," because I think that's something that most people shy away from. And what I mean by that is, for the majority of people's lives, all they want to do is fit in. They want to be the same as everybody else. They want to be friends with everybody, and they want to be liked. And if you're different, and I mean different in both a good way or a bad way, but different, if you're different to the norm, if you are the person who's daring to be the best, you're different. You don't fit in. So you find it hard to make friends. You know, people don't want to have you around the barbecue or meet you for pints because all you're going to talk about is one thing, because you're probably single-minded in one particular way. So I love that dare to be the best, bring the best of yourself every single day. I love that.
Yeah. And listen, you know, again, I know as kids, your parents would have told you, well, are you sure they're your friends? And sometimes, Adrian, and this was a journey, I'm smiling because, you know, I used to get it, go, oh, here comes Mr. Positivity. Right. So I got that too. And, but let me say this to you, you have nothing to prove to anyone, not even yourself. And you have to stop trying to prove it to yourself too, and just accept that you are the best you can be. You are amazing, outstanding, wonderful, fantastic. Whatever resonates with you, you are. And that is all.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to prove it to anyone. You don't need to prove it to yourself either. Just get out there and be. And be the absolute best you can be. Because that is your self-fulfilling prophecy. That is setting your expectation. And that's specifically what it is. And you got to be very conscious of the expectation that you're setting out there for you and what it is you want out of life. And then you have to be prepared to bring it to life too. So you can't kind of show up half-hearted this way. You got to be 100% you, 100% the best you can be at all times. And that means you think, you talk, you do everything that you choose to do, the things that you want more in life, and usually the things that you want more than the things you don't want. So where you focus in your thoughts, where you focus in your language, who you surround yourself with. And look, Adrian, there's been many times in my life that I've outgrown my team. And that meant I have to keep growing. And I change my circle of influence. And that's not a bad thing in those people, by the way. That's okay. I still love them. But they're not part of my circle of influence when it comes to my life goals and the things I want to achieve right now.
Yeah.
So
I think that's something that scares people in some way. If they go, well, I need to change my entire circle of friends. It's not that you need to do that to start off with. I interviewed a successful entrepreneur the other day. He's got his own company in France. And he talked about tricking his subconscious mind into saying, well, I'm only going to do it a little bit. Yeah, I'm not going to go all out. I'm just going to do it a little bit. So he's tricking himself into not getting afraid to do it, because he's only trying it. He's only going to do it a little bit. And I think it's the same with sort of the circle of friends. You know, rather than spending an entire weekend with somebody on the beer, maybe go for 2 pints with them or something. You know, so you kind of, you just reduce the amount of time you spend with them, and by that you reduce the amount of influence that they have over you.
yeah, I mean, look, I have friends who I played rugby with, and if I ever go to Limerick and I happen to go to a match and I meet them afterwards, I'll have a beer and we talk about rugby. I mean, have great conversations about rugby. But that is it. Most of them, matter of fact, some of my family don't even know what I do for a living. They know a little bit, but they don't understand what I do, and that's okay. By the way, that's okay. I'm okay with that. If they want to know and they want to lean forward and they're legitimately interested, then of course I'll show them. But they have to lean forward, right? Because, you know, I spent the early parts of this career trying to fix everybody. And I realized not everybody needs to be fixed and not everybody wants to be fixed.
Wants to be fixed, yeah.
Right? So you got to leave people be whatever they want to be. And I just show up and be the best me. That's it.
I think that's good advice. It's great advice. So as they say, as we bring this in for a landing, right? Where can people find you, Pat? Online, etc. Where is the best place if somebody listens to this and you resonate with them? Where can they find you?
Well, people can reach out to me by email, right, to pat@patslattery.com, or just add me on social media. Right? LinkedIn and Facebook in particular, I'm probably the most active on, right? So, you know, but if you just reach out, Google my name on Facebook, you'll find me, right? Or Google me, you'll find me. I'll probably come up there first. But again, you know, find me at pat@patslattery.com. And if anybody has any questions, anything, they need a bit of support, but reach out. Just drop an email.
Perfect. And as sort of you've given a wealth of advice over the last hour and 24 minutes. What would be your final thing that you would say to people to sort of take away if they took one thing away?
Keep going. Keep going. Somebody asked me, what would I say to my 18-year-old self? And that's keep going, because at 18, I wasn't sure if what I was doing was working. I was questioning myself. I was questioning my ability. And I still meet a lot of people. I met people at 70 years old who still ask that question. And I always say, just keep going. Because if you don't know if what you're doing is working, keep going. Because chances are it is. And you will meet the fruits of your labor. Just keep going.
Fantastic. That resonates with the page of Think and Grow Rich that's open here in front of me, which is persistence. Yeah. I've been reading that page for the last month.
Yeah. Well, something I with all the people I mentor, they know I keep telling them, be patiently persistent. Patiently persistent. Everybody wants instant gratification. Patiently persistent. And you will achieve whatever it is you want to achieve.
It's fantastic. Listen, Pat, it's been an absolute pleasure and an actual education for me here this evening. I hope it is for everybody else. And thank you very, very much for taking the time to speak with us. It's really, really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, Adrian. Thank you.
Thanking you.